The Jael Imperial Academy floated in the void between star systems, a monument to excess masquerading as education. Constructed from crystallized dark matter and powered by a captive micro-quasar, it was the kind of place that made you wonder if the architects were compensating for something. Probably several things. The institution had produced 7 galactic emperors, 43 fleet admirals, and countless diplomats who'd negotiated peace treaties while simultaneously insulting everyone involved. It was, without question, the most prestigious military academy in known space, which meant it was also the most insufferable. The student body represented 217 species from across 4 galactic arms. Each one convinced their particular flavor of xenobiology made them naturally superior commanders. The Velkrin prided themselves on their four-armed coordination and pattern recognition capabilities. The Horth delegation never shut up about their distributed consciousness and tactical hive-mind advantages. The crystalline Shen could process battlefield data at quantum speeds, which they mentioned approximately every 12 minutes. And then there were the humans. Humans had been part of the galactic community for exactly 47 years, which in cosmic terms was roughly equivalent to showing up to a black tie event wearing a bathrobe. They'd stumbled into faster-than-light travel through what most xenobiologists agreed was sheer dumb luck, mixed with weaponized stubbornness. Their planet had nearly killed them 6 different ways before they'd even invented the steam engine. They'd fought 2 world wars with chemical weapons and nuclear fire before figuring out international cooperation. Their idea of first contact protocol had been to aim every weapon system at the alien vessel and then, when that didn't work, invite the visitors for something called pizza. The galactic community had accepted Earth's application to the greater civilization with the enthusiasm of a homeowners association approving a college fraternity house. Humans were tolerated mostly, in the same way one tolerates a puppy that hasn't been house-trained yet. They were given minor colony rights, limited trade agreements, and 1 seat on the Galactic Council that everyone ignored. When Earth had requested a position at the Jael Imperial Academy for military exchange purposes, the admissions board had laughed for 15 minutes straight before realizing the humans were serious. They'd accepted 1 candidate, partially for diversity optics, partially because the Academy's charter technically couldn't refuse member species, but mostly because the idea of watching a human try to compete with species that had been waging interstellar warfare since Earth's Jurassic period was entertainment value too good to pass up. The Tactical Analysis Amphitheater could seat 3,000 students in concentric rings that descended toward a central holographic display platform. The architecture was designed to make students feel simultaneously important and insignificant, a psychological trick that cost more than most planetary defense systems. Morning light from the captured star streamed through transparent aluminum walls, casting everything in a golden glow that screamed prestigious institution vibes. Professor Kryn stood at the center platform, all 7 of his tentacles typing notes into separate data tablets simultaneously. He was a Kixlar, a species that had evolved in the crushing gravity of a super-Earth, which meant he looked like someone had tried to create an octopus but gave up halfway through and just added eyes randomly. Lots of eyes. He'd been teaching at the academy for 60 years and had the kind of reputation that made students either drop the class immediately or dedicate their entire existence to impressing him. Today's class focused on defensive strategic scenarios, the kind of nightmare situations that kept military commanders awake at night. The simulation was elegant in its brutality. You commanded a fortress position with limited forces. The enemy had superior numbers, better intelligence, and controlled the high ground. Your supply lines were compromised. Reinforcements were 48 hours away. The civilian population in the valley below numbered 300,000. There was no winning this scenario. The best you could hope for was minimizing casualties while maintaining defensive integrity long enough for evacuation and reinforcement. Every military academy in the galaxy used some variation of this test. It wasn't about victory. It was about demonstrating you understood the heavy cost of command, that you could make impossible choices with grace and tactical soundness. The record for lowest casualty percentage belonged to Admiral Threx, who'd scored a 31% loss rate during his cadet years and had gone on to become one of the greatest defensive strategists in galactic history. Carvex lounged in the front row with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never experienced meaningful failure. He was Velcrin, which meant he stood roughly 8 feet tall when fully extended, with 4 arms that could each operate independently thanks to a decentralized nervous system. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where everything was trying to kill everything else, and they'd brought that competitive drive with them to the stars. Velcrin commanded a disproportionate number of flag positions in the galactic fleet, not because of nepotism, but because they were genuinely exceptional at military command. Carvex's family controlled 3 systems and a merchant fleet that moved enough cargo to influence market prices. He'd scored in the 99th percentile on every entrance exam. His tactical simulations were studied by upper-level students, and he knew it. He wore his success like cologne, suffocating and impossible to ignore. The current simulation belonged to a Horth student who was learning in real time that hive-mind tactical processing didn't help when you fundamentally misunderstood the scenario parameters. Professor Kryn stopped the simulation with a gesture that somehow conveyed deep disappointment through tentacle movement alone. "You tried to save everyone," Kryn said, his translator rendering his chemical communication into flat galactic standard. "Noble. Foolish. You spread your forces so thin defending every position that you defended nothing. 47% casualties, complete tactical collapse, and the civilian center destroyed anyway. Next." Carvex rose without being called, which was the kind of power move that would get most students reprimanded, but just made Kryn's eyes narrow with interest. "Professor, if I may demonstrate the proper approach to this scenario." There was no question in his voice. It was a statement. The universe was full of beings who asked permission and beings who announced intentions. Carvex had never seen the point of the former category. "By all means." Kryn gestured to the holographic interface. Several students in the back rows opened betting pools on their data tablets. The odds on Carvex beating the Academy record sat at embarrassingly favorable. The simulation initialized. Carvex's avatar appeared in the Fortress Command Center, a digital representation of the exact situation that had broken countless military minds. Enemy forces massed on 3 sides. Contested territory in every direction. That civilian population in the valley, helpless and vulnerable, weighing on every tactical decision. What happened next was a masterclass in conventional military doctrine. Carvex assessed the situation with machine precision, his 4 hands dancing across the multiple control interfaces simultaneously. He reinforced weak points in the defensive line, established overlapping fields of fire, positioned his artillery to maximize enemy casualties while minimizing exposure. He sacrificed the outer defensive positions in a calculated retreat that drew enemy forces into kill zones. He held the secondary line with reserves positioned for rapid response to any breakthrough. His supply situation was desperate, so he rationed ammunition and established rotating defensive positions to prevent exhaustion. He couldn't save all the civilians, so he prioritized evacuation routes for the maximum number while using the geography of the valley to slow enemy advances. Every decision was textbook. Every maneuver was doctrinally sound. It was the kind of performance that military historians would annotate and study. The simulation ran its course. Enemy forces battered themselves against prepared positions. Casualties mounted on both sides. Defensive lines bent but didn't break. When the 48-hour mark hit and reinforcements arrived, Carvex had held the position with a 29% casualty rate. The amphitheater erupted. Students from a dozen species made their various species-specific approval noises. Carvex had just broken a record that had stood for 30 years. Professor Crin's tentacles performed what might have been applause, or might have been a threat display. It was genuinely hard to tell with his species. Carvex returned to his seat with the expression of someone who just confirmed what he already knew about himself. One of his friends, a Velcrin named Thex, clasped his shoulder in congratulation. New Academy record. They'll put your name on the wall. They should put it there twice, Carvex said, loud enough for several rows to hear. His eyes, all four of them, tracked to the back of the amphitheater where a human sat alone. Though I suppose standards have fallen if they're letting primitives attend now. The human didn't react. She was taking notes on an actual physical tablet with an actual physical stylus, like some kind of archaeological artifact come to life. Her uniform was standard Earth military, which looked painfully basic compared to the adaptive smart fabric worn by everyone else. No built-in environmental controls, no biological integration, just dyed cloth with decorative metal shapes pinned to it. Lieutenant Maya Torres had been at the academy for 3 months and had maintained a profile so low it was practically subterranean. She attended lectures, submitted assignments, and spoke only when directly addressed. The other students had initially tried to engage her with the kind of forced politeness you'd show an exchange student from a remedial school. But she'd made it clear she was there to learn, not socialize. The rumors about her varied wildly. Some said she was military intelligence, gathering data on galactic warfare. Others claimed she was political theater, Earth's attempt to seem relevant. A few believed she was actually an android or uplifted primate rather than an actual human officer. The truth was somehow more mundane and more complicated. She was exactly what her documentation claimed. An Earth military officer on an exchange program, assigned to observe and report on galactic military doctrine. What the rumors missed was her service record. Maya had been a tactical officer in the Earth Defense Force during the border conflicts, a series of skirmishes with automated mining platforms from a defunct alien corporation that had malfunctioned and then started treating human ships as ore deposits. She'd commanded defensive operations for 14 months against an enemy that had no tactics, no strategy, just relentless mechanical efficiency. She'd won by learning to think like malfunctioning software, predicting patterns that had no pattern, finding exploits in systems that weren't designed to be exploited. She'd been offered a promotion and a training position. She'd requested the academy instead. When asked why, she'd said she wanted to learn from species that had been doing this for longer than humanity had been using fire. What she didn't say was that she wanted to see if all that experience had made them better or just more rigid. Professor Crin was reviewing Carvex's performance with the kind of detailed analysis that would normally take an hour. Maya stopped taking notes. She'd seen enough. The simulation was elegant, and Carvex's execution had been flawless. But there was something bothering her about the scenario itself. Something that felt off in a way she couldn't quite articulate yet. The human looks confused, Carvex announced to the amphitheater, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone who wants everyone to hear them pretending not to want everyone to hear them. Perhaps the concepts are beyond her species' cognitive range. Humans only recently discovered fire, after all. Give them another few thousand years, and they might understand basic defensive strategy. A few students laughed. Most looked uncomfortable. Insulting other students was technically allowed under the Academy's charter, which viewed verbal combat as training for diplomatic scenarios. But there was an unspoken rule about punching down. Humans were new, primitive, struggling. Mocking them was like celebrating a victory over an opponent who'd shown up to a duel with a training sword. Maya looked up from her tablet, made eye contact with Carvex, set the stylus down with deliberate care. "I understand the strategy just fine," she said. Her voice was quiet but carried in the acoustically perfect amphitheater. "I'm confused about why everyone thinks it's impressive." The laughter stopped. Several students checked their translators, wondering if there had been some error in converting her words from Earth's primary linguistic family. Surely she hadn't just insulted a record-breaking performance. Surely this primitive from a species that still used chemical propulsion hadn't just implied that Carvex's masterful display was somehow inadequate. Carvex's expression went through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, amusement, and then something colder. "Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate superior tactics, Lieutenant. I'm certain we'd all benefit from observing human strategic doctrine." He loaded the word human with enough contempt to violate several Geneva conventions. Professor Crin's tentacles stopped moving. This was developing into something interesting. "Lieutenant Torres, you have an alternative approach to the scenario?" Maya stood. Every eye in the amphitheater tracked her movement. She was small by galactic standards, barely 6 feet tall, with the kind of build that came from high-gravity birth and a career spent in military service. Her hair was tied back in a regulation bun. Her face was the kind of forgettable that intelligence officers spent years trying to cultivate. She looked exactly like what everyone expected a human to look like. Unremarkable, outmatched, and about to embarrass herself. She walked down to the holographic display platform. Carvex watched her approach with the expression of a predator watching prey wander into optimal strike range. "The scenario is a classic defensive situation," Maya said, not to Carvex, but to the class. "Enemy has superior numbers and intelligence. We have limited forces and time. The goal is to minimize casualties while holding until reinforcements arrive." She paused at the interface. "But I have a question before I run the simulation." "Of course you do," Carvex muttered, loud enough to hear. Maya ignored him. "Professor, in this scenario, how did we acquire the enemy intelligence? The data showing their force composition, attack vectors, and timing." Professor Crin's eyes, several of them, blinked in surprise. In 60 years of running this simulation, no student had ever asked about the intelligence sources. It's provided as part of the scenario parameters, standard reconnaissance and signals intelligence. But where specifically? Long-range sensors? Captured communications? Spy satellites? Human intelligence assets? "Does it matter?" Carvex interjected. "Intelligence is intelligence. You use what you have." Maya turned to look at him. "It matters if the intelligence is wrong." The amphitheater went very quiet. Suggesting that scenario parameters might be flawed was like suggesting that mathematics might be incorrect. The scenarios were designed by the galaxy's best military minds, tested across centuries of use, refined to perfection. They weren't wrong. They were foundational truth. "The intelligence is accurate," Professor Crin said carefully. "For the purposes of the simulation." "Right. For the purposes of the simulation." Maya activated the holographic interface. "Let me try something." The scenario initialized. The same fortress, the same desperate situation, the same overwhelming enemy forces. For the first few minutes, Maya's approach looked conventional enough. She reviewed the defensive positions, checked supply status, examined the terrain. Students started to relax. The human was going to attempt the same strategy as everyone else, probably perform adequately, definitely not break any records. Then Maya started giving orders that made every military professional in the amphitheater question whether she understood what military meant. She pulled forces from the primary defensive line, not repositioning them, just pulling them back entirely. She abandoned the outer fortifications that Carvex had used so effectively as sacrifice positions. She concentrated her forces in what looked like a full retreat posture, which would have been reasonable except she wasn't retreating toward the fortress. She was moving laterally, toward terrain that every tactical manual described as strategically worthless. "She's panicking," someone whispered. "No, look at the formations. She's doing this deliberately." Deliberately losing. Maya's avatar in the simulation was now positioned in a rocky canyon network that offered neither good defensive positions nor escape routes. She'd brought artillery but positioned it in ways that made no sense for defensive fire. She'd split her forces across multiple positions that couldn't support each other. Her supply trains were exposed. The civilian population in the valley was now completely undefended. The enemy forces in the simulation detected the abandoned defensive positions, did exactly what enemy forces do when they detect abandoned defensive positions. They advanced. This was the part where Maya's strategy should have collapsed entirely. The enemy had clear approach routes to the fortress, to the civilian center, to every valuable objective. They had numbers and momentum. They'd won before the first shot was fired. Except they didn't advance on the fortress. The enemy forces, following their intelligence reports about defensive positions and force concentrations, moved toward where the intelligence said Maya's forces were positioned, which meant they moved into the canyon network where Maya actually was positioned, having apparently abandoned strategic objectives for terrain that offered no tactical value. What happened next happened very fast. Maya's artillery, positioned wrong for defensive fire, turned out to be positioned perfectly for ambush fire into canyon approaches. Her split forces that couldn't support each other in defense suddenly had overlapping fields of fire, creating a kill zone. Her exposed supply trains were actually decoys, broadcasting false signals. Every decision that looked like incompetent panic was revealed as deliberate misdirection. The enemy forces walked into a meat grinder. Their intelligence told them they were pursuing a retreating, disorganized force. The reality was they'd been channeled into terrain where their numbers became a liability and their technological advantages meant nothing. The simulation became less a battle and more an execution. When the dust settled and the simulation ended, Maya's forces had taken 0 casualties. The enemy had been effectively destroyed. The fortress was untouched. The civilian population never came under threat. The amphitheater sat in stunned silence. The holographic displays showed the final results, numbers that should not have been possible. 0% casualties. Complete tactical victory. A scenario designed to be unwinnable had just been solved with the kind of decisive perfection that military theorists insisted was impossible. Professor Crin's tentacles moved slowly across his data tablets, checking the simulation logs for errors or glitches. There were none. "Lieutenant Torres, explain your reasoning." Maya deactivated the holographic interface. The intelligence was too good. Enemy force compositions down to individual units, exact timing of attacks, precise defensive positions they were targeting. That's not normal reconnaissance data. That's the kind of intelligence you only get if the enemy wants you to have it. Deception operations, Professor Kryn said slowly. Exactly. So I assumed the intelligence was deliberately leaked. They wanted us in those defensive positions because those positions were actually disadvantageous. They wanted us committed to protecting the fortress because the fortress was a trap. So I did what they didn't expect. I ignored the intelligence and positioned for an ambush based on where they'd have to go if they were following their own deception plan. Karvik stood up. That's cheating. You changed the scenario parameters. The intelligence is provided as accurate. The intelligence parameters said it came from standard reconnaissance. Maya said calmly. I analyzed it the way you'd analyze any battlefield intelligence. It was statistically too perfect, which meant it was probably manipulated. I played the scenario the way it would actually happen. You changed the scenario. Karvex descended toward the platform, all four arms gesturing aggressively. You're supposed to work with the provided parameters, not invent your own reality. I worked with the parameters. I just didn't accept them at face value. Maya picked up her tablet. In real combat, intelligence is never perfect. If you trust it completely, you're trusting your enemy to tell you the truth. This is an academic exercise, not real combat. Then why do you teach it as preparation for real combat? Professor Kryn raised a tentacle for silence. Lieutenant Torres raises a valid tactical consideration. In practical application, intelligence analysis includes assessing source reliability and potential deception. However, the scenario is designed to test decision-making under specific constraints. Changing those constraints is unprecedented, Karvex interrupted. It's unprecedented because it's wrong. She didn't beat the scenario, she invented a different scenario and beat that instead. It's meaningless. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, the way you look at a problem you're trying to solve. You want to make it meaningful? Let's make it meaningful. What are you proposing? You said humans lack cognitive sophistication for military command. Prove it. Challenge me to something that isn't a simulation, something where we both have to work with real uncertainty. The amphitheater buzzed with sudden interest. Academic debates were common. Simulation competitions happened weekly. But a direct challenge between students, with reputations on the line, was rare enough to be entertaining. Karvex's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if you were very generous with your definitions. You want a practical demonstration of superiority? Fine. I challenge you to arena combat. Unarmed, no artificial enhancements, first to yield or incapacitation. The Academy Charter allows it for honor disputes. Several students gasped. Arena combat was legal, technically, but was generally considered the recourse of students too stupid to settle disagreements through academic competition. It was primitive, barbaric, exactly the kind of thing you'd expect from someone like Karvex when his ego got wounded. Maya should have said no. Should have taken the moral high ground and refused to engage in physical violence over a tactical disagreement. Should have demonstrated that humans were above such primitive displays of dominance. She smiled instead. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd spent 3 months being treated like a remedial student and had finally been given permission to push back. Sure. When and where? Professor Kryn's tentacles performed what was definitely a threat display this time. This is highly irregular. Lieutenant Torres, you're not obligated to accept. There are academic channels for resolving disputes. I'm aware, Professor. I accept anyway. Karvex's confidence grew visible. He had 4 arms, enhanced reflexes, and armor-like skin that had evolved to shrug off attacks from megafauna. Maya was human, which meant she was physically inferior by every measurable metric. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a lesson about the natural order of galactic hierarchy. "Tonight," Carvex said. "Arena 7. Standard rules. Try not to get hurt too badly, Lieutenant. Earth's medical technology is a bit behind ours. It might take you months to recover." Maya picked up her tablet and stylus. "I'll try to remember that." The amphitheater emptied with unusual speed as students rushed to spread word of the upcoming fight. By the time Maya reached her quarters, the entire academy knew. Betting pools had already formed, odds so heavily favored toward Carvex that finding someone willing to take Maya's side required offering absurd payout ratios. Maya's quarters were standard student housing, a 12 by 12 space with a sleeping platform, study terminal, and enough room to pace if you didn't mind doing it in circles. She sat on the sleeping platform and stared at the wall, which was decorated with exactly 0 personal items because she hadn't brought any. Her communicator chimed. Captain Rodriguez from Earth Force Command, checking in on the exchange program. Maya considered not answering, then reconsidered. Rodriguez was her commanding officer. Ignoring her would raise questions. Lieutenant Torres reporting. Rodriguez's face appeared on the small screen, looking exhausted in the way that command staff always looked exhausted. "Maya, got a minute?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm hearing rumors that you challenged a Velcrin student to arena combat. Please tell me those rumors are wrong." "He challenged me, ma'am. I accepted." Rodriguez closed her eyes and counted to 10 in a way that suggested she'd been counting to 10 a lot lately. "You're at the academy to observe and learn, not get into fights with aliens who have 4 arms and skin like tank armor." "With respect, ma'am, I'm learning a lot about galactic military culture. Apparently, when your ego gets wounded, you challenge people to fights. That's not helping your case." He implied humans are cognitively inferior. Front of 300 students. If I back down, that becomes the official stance on humanity. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "What are your chances? Of winning? Or surviving?" "Maya, honestly, no idea. I've never fought a Velcrin before. But I've studied their combat doctrine, and it's the same as their military doctrine. Aggressive, technically perfect, completely by the book. That's exploitable. Everything's exploitable until it punches you through a wall." Rodriguez sighed. "I can't order you to withdraw. The Academy Charter gives students autonomy over honor disputes. But I can strongly suggest that getting hospitalized over a classroom disagreement isn't worth it." "Noted, ma'am." "Good luck, Lieutenant. Try to keep all your bones intact." The connection ended. Maya set the communicator aside and lay back on the sleeping platform, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't actually sure she could win this fight. Carvex had every physical advantage. But she'd learned something during the border conflicts. During those 14 months fighting malfunctioning mining platforms that should have killed her crew a dozen times over. Advantages only mattered if you used them conventionally. The moment you stopped fighting the way your opponent expected, advantages became assumptions, and assumptions were weaknesses. Arena 7 was one of the smaller combat training facilities, designed for hand-to-hand practice rather than large-scale tactical exercises. The floor was synthetic material that absorbed impacts without being slippery. The walls were reinforced transparent aluminum, allowing observers to watch while protecting them from stray violence. The ceiling was high enough that you could throw someone upward without worrying about concussions from architecture. By the time Maya arrived, the observation galleries were packed. Word had spread beyond the tactical analysis class. Students from other disciplines, even some faculty, had shown up to watch the human get systematically dismantled by a Velcrin in peak physical condition. The betting pools had evolved into complex derivatives markets. Someone was selling commemorative merchandise. Carvex was already in the arena, performing stretches that showcased his four-armed physiology. His species' combat style involved rapid strikes from multiple angles, grappling techniques that leveraged extra limbs, and defensive postures that protected vital areas while maintaining offensive capability. He'd studied martial arts from 6 different species and held regional championships in 3 of them. Maya entered the arena in her standard duty uniform minus any equipment. No armor, no weapons, just the uniform and boots. She looked painfully small compared to Carvex, like someone had sent a child to fight an adult. An arbiter, a neutral faculty member from the crystalline Shen species, floated at the arena's center. The Shen didn't have bodies in the traditional sense, just organized energy matrices, which made them ideal referees because you couldn't accuse them of physical bias. This is an honor dispute under Academy Charter Section 7, Subsection 12. Combat is unarmed and continues until one participant yields or is rendered unable to continue. Lethal force is prohibited. Medical teams are standing by. Do both participants understand the rules? Yes, Carvex said. Sure, Maya said. Then begin. Carvex moved first, because of course he did. His species didn't believe in defensive starts. He closed the distance in a blur, 4 arms moving in coordinated patterns designed to overwhelm Maya's ability to defend. The attack was textbook perfect, the kind of combination that had won him championships. Maya wasn't where the attack expected her to be. She'd moved laterally, not back, sliding into the gap between Carvex's aggressive approach and the arena wall. His momentum carried him past her. One of his arms clipped her shoulder, a glancing blow that would bruise but nothing serious. Carvex pivoted, faster than something that large should be able to pivot, and launched a follow-up combination. Maya blocked with her forearms, taking hits that would have shattered human bones if she'd tried to stop them. Instead, she redirected, using Carvex's power against his positioning, forcing him to readjust his stance. Stop running and fight, Carvex growled. Maya didn't respond. She was too busy analyzing his patterns. Every attack combination followed the same basic structure. High, low, middle, high, using his forearms in rotation to maintain constant pressure. It was efficient, technically perfect, and completely predictable once you saw the pattern. Carvex pressed his advantage, driving Maya back toward the arena wall. The crowd was cheering, sensing victory. This was going exactly how everyone expected. The primitive human was outmatched, outgunned, and about to learn a valuable lesson about galactic hierarchy. Maya's back hit the wall. Carvex grinned, all 4 arms positioning for a combination that would end the fight. He struck. Maya dropped. Not dodged, not rolled, just dropped straight down into a crouch that put her below Carvex's prepared strikes. His 4 arms hit the reinforced wall behind her with impacts that made the transparent aluminum flex. Before he could recover, Maya drove upward, not at Carvex, but at his center of balance. Humans had evolved to walk upright on 2 legs, which was inefficient for stability, but excellent for mobility. Velcrin had evolved a wider stance optimized for their 4-armed physiology. That wider stance meant a higher center of gravity. Maya hit Carvex at exactly the point where physics stopped caring about technique and started caring about leverage. Carvex went down, not gracefully. His face hit the arena floor with a sound that made several observers wince. Maya followed him down, not giving him space to recover. She wasn't trying to match his strength. She was trying to control his positioning, keep him off balance, prevent him from using his forearms effectively in close quarters. Carvex thrashed, trying to get leverage for a throw. Maya shifted her weight, trapped one of his arms under her knee, hyperextended another at the elbow joint. It was the kind of dirty fighting that no martial arts discipline taught, because it assumed your opponent would be roughly your same size and shape. When your opponent had 4 arms and extra joints, dirty fighting became creative problem-solving. "Yield," Maya said quietly. "Never." Carvex managed to get one arm free, through an elbow that caught Maya in the ribs. Pain exploded across her side, probably cracked something. She ignored it, used the moment of his extension to shift position, got an arm around his neck in a chokehold that would have been impossible if she was trying to fight fairly. Carvex struggled. His species had redundant circulatory systems, which meant choking them out took longer. But biology was still biology. Oxygen deprivation affected everyone eventually. His struggles became weaker. His forearms stopped coordinating and started just flailing. "Yield?" Maya repeated. For a moment, it looked like Carvex would pass out rather than admit defeat. Then his hand tapped the mat twice, the universal signal for submission. Maya released him immediately, rolled away, put distance between them. The arbiter floated down, energy matrix flickering in what might have been surprise. "Lieutenant Torres wins by submission." The observation galleries were absolutely silent. Students stared at the arena floor where Carvex was gasping for breath, all 4 arms wrapped around his torso in what might have been pain or might have been humiliation. Maya stood at the far end of the arena, one hand pressed to her ribs where the elbow strike had landed, looking like she'd just finished a particularly tedious training exercise. Medical teams rushed into the arena. They checked Carvex first, found bruised pride and a sprained elbow, but nothing serious. They turned to Maya, who waved them off. "I'm fine." "Ma'am, you're favoring your left side. That suggests rib damage." "It suggests I got hit in the ribs. I'll ice it later." The medical team looked at her the way medical teams universally look at patients who refuse treatment, then departed with the air of professionals who'd file a report and let command deal with it. Maya walked toward the arena exit. Students parted to let her pass, staring at her like she'd just revealed herself to be something other than human. In a way, maybe she had. Carvex represented everything the galactic community believed about military excellence. 4-armed physiological advantage, championship-level training, aggressive tactical doctrine, technical perfection. He'd lost to a human who'd been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. Professor Kryn waited outside the arena, several tentacles typing notes. That was educational. The fight? The entire day, you challenged assumptions in the classroom and in combat. Both times by refusing to engage on the terms everyone expected. Kryn's eyes focused on her. Question, Lieutenant. In your simulation, did you actually believe the intelligence was deliberately misleading? Or did you reverse engineer a justification for an unorthodox approach? Maya considered lying, considered saying she'd analyzed the data and reached a logical conclusion through pure tactical reasoning. Instead, she told the truth. I saw that everyone who attempted the scenario used defensive doctrine. Full defensive commitment, minimizing losses, holding until reinforcement. And I thought, what if that's the trap? What if the scenario is designed to make you think defensively when offense is actually the solution? So I looked for reasons to justify an offensive approach, and the intelligence quality gave me that justification. So you worked backward from the solution you wanted. I worked backward from the assumption that everyone else was wrong. If a scenario has been used for decades, and everyone approaches it the same way. Either that approach is correct, or everyone's missing something. Given that the scenario is supposedly unsolvable, I figured everyone was missing something. Crin's tentacles stopped typing. That's not logical reasoning, Lieutenant. That's contrarian instinct. Yes, sir. It's also how your species operates, isn't it? You see established wisdom and immediately look for ways it might be wrong. You encounter superior forces and wonder if superiority is actually a weakness. You join a galactic community millions of years more advanced and think perhaps they've been doing things wrong. We prefer to think of it as keeping an open mind. Everyone else would call it arrogance. Crin resumed typing. But arrogance paired with results is called innovation. You'll be pleased to know your simulation approach is being reviewed for inclusion in advanced tactical training. If intelligence can be manipulated, students should learn to recognize and counter it. Maya blinked. They're actually considering changing the curriculum based on what I did. You broke a scenario that was designed to be unbreakable. That has implications for how we teach tactical analysis. Whether we intended it or not, you've demonstrated a flaw in our educational approach. Crin's translator somehow conveyed amusement. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've proven that sometimes the newest, most primitive, most arrogant species in the room can teach the old ones something new. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. You absolutely meant to. You've been here 3 months watching students from species with millions of years of military history. And you've been waiting for an opportunity to prove humans deserve to be here. Today you got that opportunity. You took it with both hands and beat us over the head with it. Maya didn't have a response to that, mostly because it was completely accurate. Go get your ribs checked properly, Crin said. That's not a request. That's an order from a faculty member. And Lieutenant, next time you want to prove a point, perhaps don't do it by giving a Velcrin noble an existential crisis. His family controls 3 star systems. They're not going to appreciate their heir being choked out by a human. Noted, sir. Maya walked back to her quarters, ribs aching, mind replaying the entire day. She'd come to the academy to learn. She had learned, just not what she expected. She'd learned that advanced civilization didn't make you smarter, it made you more certain. Certainty was comfortable. Comfortable was predictable. And predictable was beatable. She'd learned that sometimes the best way to win was to refuse to play the game everyone else was playing. Carvex had expected a fight that followed martial arts convention. She'd given him a brawl that followed Murphy's Law and spite. She'd learned that humans, despite being new and primitive and evolutionary babies in a galactic community of ancient civilizations, had one advantage that millions of years of advancement couldn't replicate. Humans were really, really good at being underestimated. Her communicator chimed again. Captain Rodriguez, probably having heard about the arena fight and preparing to deliver a speech about conduct and diplomatic relations. Maya answered anyway. Rodriguez appeared on screen, looking less exhausted and more resigned. You won. Yes, ma'am. You beat a 4-armed alien with championship-level training by essentially wrestling him into submission. That's an accurate summary, yes. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. The Galactic Council is going to file complaints. The Velcrin Diplomatic Corps is going to demand apologies. Earth's ambassadorial team is going to spend the next month doing damage control. And do you know what my orders from command are? No, ma'am. Keep doing what you're doing. Command says if the galaxy is going to underestimate humanity, we might as well make it hurt when they figure out they're wrong. Rodriguez almost smiled. Get your ribs checked. That's an order. And Torres? Yes, ma'am. Welcome to being humanity's unofficial ambassador for galactic ass-kicking. Try not to start any wars. The connection ended. Maya sat in her quarters, alone, ribs throbbing, exhausted, and somehow more satisfied than she'd been in months. Outside her window, the captured star that powered the academy burned bright against the void. Somewhere in that void was Earth, 47 light-years away, still figuring out its place in a galactic community that had been running things for longer than humans had been human. That place, Maya was beginning to suspect, might not be as small as everyone assumed. Not because humans were better, but because they'd spent their entire history being told they were worse and refusing to believe it. The Jael Imperial Academy would continue producing military commanders for the Galactic Fleet. They'd add a note to their curriculum about intelligence analysis and deception operations, a small change that acknowledged a human had spotted a flaw in their teaching methodology. And somewhere in their records, they'd add a footnote about an arena combat between a Velcrin noble and a human officer that lasted 2 minutes and ended with the Velcrin tapping out. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And humans had always been good at starting with not much and turning it into something the universe couldn't ignore. In the student forums, the betting pools closed. A handful of students who'd taken long odds on Maya collected ridiculous payouts. Analysis threads exploded with breakdowns of the simulation and the fight. Students from 200 species arguing about tactics and technique and whether humans represented a legitimate military philosophy or just got lucky twice. And in his quarters, Karvek stared at his 4 hands and wondered when technical perfection had stopped being enough to guarantee victory. The universe, he was beginning to understand, didn't care about his training or his championship titles or his family's control over 3 star systems. The universe cared about results. The human had gotten results. He'd gotten humiliated. It was, he thought bitterly, going to be a long academic year. Somewhere in the void, the universe continued spinning, indifferent to the small dramas of small beings in a small academy floating between stars. But small dramas had ways of becoming large patterns, and patterns, once established, had ways of changing how the universe worked. Humanity had just established a pattern. Whether the galaxy was ready for it remained to be seen.